Mary Kovacs and I are thrilled to have a special guest with us this morning, Attorney General Doug Downey. He's been Attorney General in Ontario since 2019, so we're thrilled to do this show with him. And good morning, Attorney General.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on.
So that readers have a better understanding of your role as Attorney General, what are some of the primary duties when it comes to administrating the courthouses and justice system in Ontario?
Yeah, I'll just go right to basics, which is, or I'll start there. And it's the province's job to run the administration of the courts. And regardless of whether the judges are appointed federally for the Superior Court and Court of Appeal, or in Ontario Provincial Court, we appoint those judges, but the administration overall is run by the provinces. And that's just the way the Constitution laid it out, and that's how we operate.
Right. There's some confusion, federal, provincial, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's clear the way it's run. Provincial has most of the courts. Is that correct?
That's right. And there are federal courts and tax courts and other courts, but what your average listener or watcher's going to be familiar with is run by the province. So we're actually the second largest land manager in government, if you can imagine. It is quite a footprint. It's a lot of and a lot of people. We have the second largest frontline service size in the government. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of space, but we service a lot of the public.
Great. Mary?
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Attorney General, do you believe that judges should be held accountable for decisions they make?
Yeah, I think it's important that the system itself has accountability built into it. And that has to do with appeal rights. It has to do with trial coordinators and others making sure the system's functioning properly. There is judges, although they have their independence, they're not free to do anything they want. There is systems and checkpoints for them amongst themselves as well. So I think everybody wants there to be accountability in all parts of the system. The big debate becomes, what does that look like? What is the accountability? How does it work? Who's responsible? And that's where you hear people talking about different views of the way they think the system should operate.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts, Attorney General, and beliefs in our court system being open and transparent?
Yeah, we start with the open courts principle, right? Which is, with some exceptions, you can go down to the courthouse and you can walk in and you can see the proceedings, whether it be bail court or a trial or any number of things. There are, of course, some exceptions to that, and for good reason. When it's dealing with a child or dealing with some sort of exploitation, the most vulnerable have to have some protections from the public eye, so that we respect their privacy. But I think the open court principle is one that we've held dear for absolute hundreds of years. And I'll give you an example of how we enhanced that through the pandemic. It used to be, if you were a corporate lawyer and you wanted to close a deal, you'd have to go into the courthouse, check this, effectively a computer, a box of updates to see if there's anything happening on the deal that you were working with. Well, of course, during the pandemic, we couldn't get in the courthouse. So we moved pretty quickly and we got that information posted to the web instead. And what that did, I heard from reporters say, hey, now I can see what's going on. And I think that kind of openness and transparency is something we should be moving towards.
Great. And that's when you were appointed Attorney General in 2019, you didn't know that it was a real learning curve. You in 2020 and the pandemic hit, and you had to 360 to everything had to change accordingly.
The world changed, as we all know, but what an opportunity to harness the possibility of technology. The things that we've done to be able to modernize the system. I believe we modernized, 20 years in 20 days. It really was due for change. We had already started to move in that direction, but nothing like a crisis to expedite things.
Right.
That's
Mary,
right.
Mary.
Yes. So, Attorney General, can you tell our readers about any new changes or initiatives which the Ontario government will be doing to make our justice system even better than it is today?
Yeah, there's so many things that we have in motion and that we're working on, and I'll start with operationally, the investments that we've made in staffing. When you wouldn't know this necessarily, but before I was a lawyer, I was a court clerk, so I was taking filings over the counter, and then I did a master's degree, and one of my professors was actually Justice Kovacs from St. Catharines. I don't know if it's any relation. He was very kind to me and actually encouraged me to go to law school. But when I finished that degree, I became a court registrar. So I was in the courtroom. And it was back in a time where if court collapsed in 3 hours, I got sent home and I got paid 3 hours. Well, in the modern workforce, it's very difficult to attract and retain. So we have changed it so that now full-time is offered with benefits and all of the things that you would expect in a public service. And it's had great success in attracting wonderful talent and keeping the talent. It's really important. So we've invested heavily there. We've invested heavily in the prosecution teams. We have guns and gangs, what I call SWAT teams. So serious, violent, repeat offenders, anything involving guns. They come in and make sure we have our best foot forward. We've added judges to the system in historic numbers. There are 300 Ontario court judges. We're adding a minimum 25 more, which is a huge increase in relative terms. We're putting money into technology, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. We're transforming the courtroom. We're doing things very differently than we did even 5 years ago.
Wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful.
Many have reported that to us that they are pleased with having their court hearings and conferences held virtually on Zoom. Most report that this saves them time and money and avoids all costs and inconveniences having to go to a courthouse in person and sometimes having to pay for a lawyer time to wait before getting into the courtroom. Do you support this use of virtual hearings and case conferences? And do you believe that it will save time for the attorney, for the ministry and for the government?
My focus has been on the people that access the system. So we can talk about the ministry and the government and how it benefits us. But really, it's about the average person who is paying a lawyer or using legal aid, which we've expanded. We can talk about that if you wish. There's so many ways that it helps the average person in time and money, because now what's appropriate for online and what's appropriate for in person is an ongoing thing that'll take us some time to find our full water level, but we have to figure that out in concert with the judges who are presiding in the hearings. But by and large, there are some fantastic reasons why things can be online, and have a scheduled hearing. If something takes 15 minutes to check in on a case, you don't need to be trudging to the courthouse and parking and going in and taking the day off work and your lawyers being paid to sit there waiting for their turn. That's a system centered on the judges and the lawyers. That's not a system centered on the people.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yes, we all, we're all need to be in different places at different times, and it's hard to put us together. A lot of people can't afford to lose paychecks. So under section 136, bracket 2, bracket B of Ontario Courts of Justice Act, which has been in the law for decades, the people of Ontario who are attending their own court hearings have the right to audio record their own court proceedings for the purpose of implementing their notes. The former Chief Justice Holland was a strong supporter of this right, and at that one time sent out practice directives to all courts in Ontario advising the judges to respect this law. Are you familiar with the rights of people under the Courts of Justice Act to audio record their own court hearings? And do you support the rights of the people of Ontario to audio record their own court hearings to supplement their own notes is reasonable and should be respected by all judges in our courts today?
That's a great question, and it's a really technical question, but and you've got the section absolutely right. Similar to what I was just saying about sort of what courtrooms are open or closed depending on the subject matter, similar to what hearings should be happening electronically and which ones need to be in person. It's a dynamic conversation we have with judiciary and the court users. And so one size doesn't fit all is the challenge. And what we're doing is with that section, you can get permission from the judge to do exactly what you're saying. And the judge has discretion, has complete discretion, to be able to say, I'm okay with that, and I know what's happening, and let's carry on. Or if there's a reason, depending on the situation, where they say it's not appropriate and we don't want it happening, then I think the judge has to turn their mind to that. So I'm hesitant to come down black and white on it and say, every judge in every situation should do it. But I think it's an important tool that people should know about so that they can ask for it as they're going through the system.
Right. That's the important part, is to set it up, because there are hearing impaired people, there are blind people, to have notes to take for them is very important, because it's overwhelming to be in court.
Look, if you're in court, odds are you're going through some sort of stress and trauma. It's a very difficult space to be, and I it's not somewhere lawyers get used to being in court. It becomes sort of a workplace almost. But for the average person who's coming through those doors of a courthouse or even virtually, it's intimidating. There's language that is sometimes difficult to understand, and just like when you go to the doctor, when one of my family members was sick, I'm there taking notes because I won't remember everything. And so I think it's we have to recognize that. I think the judges do recognize that. But we need to make sure that people know so that they can actually ask.
Right. Thank you.
A number of people have reported to us that they have had very unpleasant experiences with police officers who work the courthouses. Some report being threatened and bullied, and in some cases assaulted. Many in Ontario say that they would like to see police officers working the courthouses to be equipped with body cams, just as many police officers in public now have. Many have told us that they would feel safer in the courts if police officers were using body cams. What is your view on having police officers use body cams while working and interacting with members of the public at courthouses?
That's an interesting thought. The security at courthouses, as you may know, is the responsibility of the local police. So, if it's in Sarnia, then it's the Sarnia police. If it's a different district, it might be the OPP. So they're really the ones responsible for security. It's not something that even though we run the administration, we don't run the security element of it. In most cases, sometimes we supplement it as we see a need. But so body cams, that's a good question. I know body cams are becoming very common, much more common, and police forces one by one are adopting it. It does lead to a lot of data for us to store and manage and have protocols around. So that's an important piece of the puzzle. But look, if a local police force is deemed body cams warranted in the public where they are, courthouses are public spaces. So that's an interesting concept. I would ultimately defer to the police force in terms of what it can manage budgetary wise. But it's sad to hear, concerning to hear that people are not feeling safe even within a courthouse.
Right.
Yes.
I agree with you. Maybe deferring it to the municipality is the way to go, because the police forces are responsible to the municipality of Toronto or Sault Ste. Marie or wherever you are.
Yeah.
Hamilton, London, yes, all of Ontario, really, right?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
Mary.
Okay, so I guess this is our last question, Attorney General. Some citizens of Ontario have reported being abused in the courtroom, threatened by judges, and lawyers right in the courtroom, and yet none of this has been found on transcripts. In other cases, people are being told that they must get an order from the judge to obtain the audio file or transcripts in their cases. And the judge will refuse to release but the judges will refuse to release the audio file. People everywhere have told us that they would have greater trust and respect in the courts if cameras were installed in the courtroom and access to the recordings made available with a short period of time and at a reasonable cost. What is your view on having cameras installed in our courts, not for the purpose of broadcasting the courts, of course, but for the proceedings, only to allow those who are part of the proceedings to quickly obtain a copy of the video file solely for the purpose of their supplementing their own notes?
That again, very, very interesting thought in terms of development. I don't know. When I first think of cameras in the courtroom, but you've already said you're not talking about broadcast, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, of course. And some courtrooms do broadcast. Supreme Court of Canada broadcasts and that sort of thing. Again, the collection and retention of information has to be governed somehow and by somebody. And we certainly don't want it to be political. That would be inappropriate. And so it falls over to the judiciary to control their spaces. And, you know, there are, if lawyers are being uncivilized, if they're being, you know, inappropriate, there are recourses for that. And there has been a real push, I'd say even last 10, maybe last 15 years, but certainly the last 10 years. The Law Society and other bodies of doing courses on being civil and all the rest of it for lawyers. There are mechanisms of complaint for that. Similarly with judges, if they're being, you know, if they're truly being abusive, if that's what's happening, then there are oversight committees for judges that can be complained to. I'm not sure, again, about a wholesale rule about recording and releasing. We're getting these courthouses wired for hybrid hearings. This is taking us, you know, we're spending tens of millions of dollars doing it, and we're making good progress. We're not even done yet, though. So I don't know that I would add another layer on at the moment until we get things up and wired. But back to open court principles, right? We want transparency. We want accountability. We want the right technology in the space. So again, I wouldn't categorically say it's a straight no and it's never appropriate, but I don't think, given where we are, that the priority has to be getting these places wired to start.
Okay, so can you explain hybrid hearings?
Yeah, so it's very much like this. So a hybrid hearing could be where the best example, I guess, is if you're doing a hearing and an expert, maybe from California, if it's a motor vehicle or some specialist from somewhere that isn't in the area, they can bring them in on video to testify and to be questioned.
Okay.
So that the hybrid means some are in the room, some are not. And again, what's appropriate and not appropriate is ultimately up to the judge to make the decision, but can sure save a lot of cost for somebody not having to pay an expert to come to, say, Sault Ste. Marie and stay overnight and give their evidence the next day and fly, and they can pop on the screen and give their best evidence that way.
Right. That's you know, that's amazing that we could do all of that now.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm done with all my questions.
Great.
Attorney
Yes,
General.
that's
Thank you so much.
all our questions, and thank you, Attorney General, for taking the time of your busy schedule.
We've got a lot of good things going, and I'm really just glad that you're helping me share the word, and we'll talk to you again. Thank you.
You've been watching. Our guest is Doug Downey, the Attorney General of Ontario, and he has had that job since 2019. Thank you, Attorney General, and we appreciate your participation.